Thursday, September 23rd. At this time, I'll ask our city clerk to please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Sanchez. Mayor Pro Tem Sanchez, are you there?
Say hi, Theodore.
Hey, here.
Councilmember Ibarra.
Here.
Councilmember Figueroa.
Here.
Councilmember Surratt.
Here.
Councilmember Nickel.
Here.
Councilmember Richard. Councilmember Richard is absent. And Councilmember Movejo.
Here.
Mayor Valdivia.
Here. All right, would you please stand with me as we salute the flag? Ready? I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, Ms. City Clerk, any public comments?
Yes, we have 4 recorded comments, and I'll get those on right now. Mitch, if you could enable the share screen, please. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council and citizens. This is Tim Prince, a lifelong resident of San Bernardino and practicing attorney for 30 years, calling for a general comment on Measure S. Measure S is a dangerous waste of taxpayers' money. It's a regressive tax. It would replace a limited 15-year tax with a permanent tax, and it would quadruple that tax permanently. I've heard of modest increases to taxes if you continue the accountability and the restrictions. I've never heard of a public body saying, let's multiply the tax by 4 and make it permanent without any restrictions. And this last minute stuff of putting restrictions on that any future city council could change, it does not guarantee anything to the taxpayers. This is a last minute, lazy, half-hearted effort to raise funds through a regressive tax. What you need to do is go back to the drawing board. You've got 2 years, and give us a tax that is limited, accountable, has guarantees that it will be spent to make the public safer rather than for more raises like we've seen in the police department and at City Hall. We don't want raises for administrators. We want safer streets. We want smart policing. We want community policing. We want more services. We want our streets fixed. We want a way for the citizens to have control of these funds and know that the funds are being used for the benefit of the citizens, not a rogue mayor, not for lawsuits, and not for raises. Vote no on Measure S on November 3rd. Thank you very much.
Greetings, this is Reverend Veronica Martindale Taylor. I am the chair of the Measure D Committee. Greetings to our council. I just wanted to leave a comment, if possible, in regarding to you accepting our roles and our responsibilities as Measure Z advisory, which we're going to be extending it to the Measure S. I'd just like you to also direct staff, if possible, as you convene in your workshop, to also adopt a good faith policy so that the community can see that you are going to direct some funding to some of those departments, as far as our public works and our parks and rec and the libraries, such as I had submitted prior to. So we could have that policy put in place before the election so that the community and the residents know that this is going to take place. It's not hypothetical. It is a good faith policy that you will direct staff to also have the funding as you convene together, have that funding also go to those issues, and so that the community can see a right now cleanup, a right now improvement. We greatly appreciate it. I hope council takes this into consideration for the community to hear and see the goodwill of the service. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good evening. My name is Leticia Garcia, and I am calling to tell the people who are watching your meeting today that we must vote no on Measure S. Whatever you are doing today to try to clean up the inferior bill that you have presented on the November ballot will not work. The people of San Bernardino need to understand that the only way to make sure that that money is accountable to something other than the police department or greedy politicians, then you must put it in the initiative. So we need to rewrite this hastily written measure and rewrite it and make sure that it serves the entire community of San Bernardino and not special interests and politicians. So people, no matter what they do today, it's all subject to change. Everything they do is subject to change. The only way to stop that from happening is to rewrite the measure and write it correctly so that we have different pots of allocated funds going toward projects that the community needs and wants. So please do not let these people dupe you into thinking that this is the only way to save the city. It is not. It is false. And do not let them extort the employees of the city of San Bernardino by telling them that they will have to be fired, furloughed, laid off, and take a pay cut. But it's absolutely untrue. Do not let fear rule you. This measure that they are proposing is in perpetuity. It's forever. So we need to get it right the first time. And this is not this right way. So again, everybody vote no on Measure F. Do not pay any attention to the nonsense dog and pony show that they are about to embark on. It's all bullshit. Thank you.
This is a public comment for tonight's workshop on the Measure S resolution. Council and public that are listening, my question is, why is it 45 days before the November 3rd election that you were sitting down and trying to put up some made-up resolution thinking that this is going to change what's going to happen in our city with our money? You have a proven track record as a city, as a elected council, even previous administrations, in mismanaging these funds. Almost $100 million of taxpayer money over the course of 15 years is unaccounted for. 3 years without audits, 2 years without the Measure Z committee meeting at all, and now we're going to believe that you're going to create a resolution that's going to change that somehow now there's going to be accountability. You changed the municipal code so the mayor could sexually harass his employees. You changed the cannabis ordinance so that you could satisfy your campaign donors. You changed the street vending ordinance because you got pressure from the community. You tried to override a development because the community wasn't happy. You guys literally changed your mind based on who's giving you money this week or how you feel. So you're going to put in a resolution that the mayor or the next council can change, and then what? We are stuck with a lifelong tax increase with zero accountability and zero allocations towards the things that the community believes are a priority. This is going to fund pensions and salaries just like the last 100 million have done. This is why we are going to continue to vote no on Measure S. You have more than enough time to put together a good measure. What you're doing today should have been done a year and a half ago, but you think you're going to dupe the residents all over again, and it's not going to happen.
This is from Hardy Brown, citizen here in San Bernardino, who asked me to read his message. To the mayor, council, and staff, you know how and why I have the opinion on the topic of Measure Z and now Measure S. All of the citizens, regardless of race, in this city have paid the bills while the workers receive all of the benefits and take the money into other communities. Now tonight you are discussing the role and responsibilities of a new citizen oversight committee that will be charged with reviewing and reporting annually on how you spend the money. You and I know this committee is a toothless tiger. So you can shift the blame. I am suggesting that you put some teeth in the committee's mouth so that when they request the information, it is provided. When advice is offered to you in the future, future council members can take it seriously. Remember, we might elect people like the current president in Washington. I emphasize teeth in the role of the committee because of the word intent on how the money is to be spent. Some of you might think spending it on the mayor's legal defense is needed. Nor can I forget what Mr. Charette said. You have not been good stewards of our money. According to Mulvihill, the first $20 million will leave the city with the retirees. Then we'll have 93% of our police officers taking another $20 million out of each year in salaries. I received the Police Officers Association letter in the mail supporting Measure S because they want more money. According to Measure Z minutes, the committee was always requesting specific information only to be ignored for 15 years, and now Measure S is for the life of the city. I also suggest that you rotate auditing firms and include Black, Latino auditing firms. I remain a no on Measure S. It's not for the people of San Bernardino. It's for special interests. Thank you.
That concludes the recorded public comments.
Okay, very good. Ms. City Manager, tonight's study session is regarding proposed Measure C expenditure policies and practices from the Measure S Citizens Oversight Committee. And the recommendation, you see it there in your packet page. I'll turn it over to our City Manager, Ms. Ledoux.
Unmute.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council
Wait,
members. Can you hear me okay?
I'm going to make a point of order.
Say your point of order.
Well, I apologize. I'm a little late chiming in, but Rob Field is our new city manager as of Monday. And I don't want to throw a monkey wrench in this thing tonight, but and I know Terry's staying with us and all that. So if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But
no, you're not wrong at all. You've got two city managers right now, and Rob and I drew straws on who's going to do the presentation.
Okay, fine. Then I'm okay. I'm okay with that.
That's a fair enough question. We're in a unique situation.
And I think Terry provided written correspondence on how this would play out. So encourage council members to read their backup material.
I might have missed that. You're right. I might have missed that. I saw.
All right, please proceed, Terry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Good evening. As directed on August 19th, tonight I will be presenting staff recommendations regarding expenditure policies and roles and responsibilities of what would become the Measure S Oversight Committee should the tax measure pass in November. But before we get started on the presentation, I just want to remind you that we are here to discuss and consider policy as it relates to allocating resources if the tax measure were approved. It is not appropriate to advocate for the tax measure itself, either in support or against. And with that, please go to the first slide. On August 19, 2020, the Measure Z Committee recommended to the Mayor and City Council the development of clear fiscal policies that ensure the city's long-term fiscal stability, provide clear direction with regard to financial management to ensure delivery of quality of services and a balanced budget, and establish reserves to meet future obligations that align with the city's key priorities. The Mayor and City Council then directed staff to return with a draft policy for review and discussion after hearing that presentation. For your review, consideration, and feedback this evening are a draft resolution establishing a Measure S Citizen Oversight Committee and a draft resolution establishing a Measure S expenditure policy. Next slide. Rita Conrad, who is still helping the city on a part-time basis, assisted the city manager's office and the finance department with researching similar policies and procedures established by other municipalities. And Rita is here to join us this evening. If Measure S is approved by the voters in November, the Measure S Citizens Oversight Committee will replace the Measure Z Committee, and staff is recommending that they be responsible for the following: reviewing the proposed Measure S expenditures as part of the annual budget process to verify that they align with the Measure S ballot language and the committee's recommendations, the Mayor and City Council's adopted strategic goals and objectives, and the city's adopted general fund reserve policy. Additionally, the committee would be responsible for providing recommendations to the Mayor and City Council each year during the budget process regarding Measure S spending plan, as well as reviewing the year-end spending report and independent audit, and present those findings to the Mayor and City Council as they currently do now. As a separate sub-fund will be used to track Measure S revenues and expenditures. The city currently tracks expenditures and revenues related to Measure Z through spreadsheets that are reconciled to the general ledger. Working with our software vendor and the new city accounting/finance team, we have determined that the city can actually set up a sub-fund of the general fund for purposes of tracking Measure S revenues and expenditures in a more efficient manner. Technically, Measure S will be general fund revenue, and our audit and CAPR guidelines require that it be legally reported as a general fund revenue and expenditures. By setting up this sub-fund, we can track Measure S revenues and expenditures separately throughout the year with no manual tracking, while also meeting the legal requirements of reporting Measure S as general fund revenue and expenditure in our audit and financial statements, the CAFR. The city manager will every year present to the Mayor and City Council and Measure S Committee a proposed Measure S spending plan as part of the budget process, and the committee's recommendations will be provided to the Mayor and Council for consideration. Allocating Measure S proceeds will first be considered in the context of preserving existing levels of service and complying with the city's general fund reserve policy. After existing levels of city services are preserved, the remaining Measure S proceeds will be used in support of Mayor and City Council's adopted strategic goals and priorities in accordance with Measure Z ballot language and with the recommendations of the Measure Z Citizens Oversight Committee, which include public safety, emergency response and violence, intervention programs, cleaner and safer neighborhoods, retaining and attracting new businesses, street, park, and library maintenance improvements, youth, senior, and homeless service programs. And it should be noted that the community surveys that have been conducted throughout the year noted these were listed as top priorities by the majority who responded. And lastly, as part of the annual budget process, the city manager will prepare a list of the city's unfunded needs. The most critical needs consistent with the uses outlined in number 4 will be included in the proposed Measure S spending plan for consideration. It is important to recognize that in order to work within the parameters of the guiding principles, city revenues, including Measure S funds, will fluctuate annually, and that funding dedicated to programs must be considered each year in the context of the annual funding needs, priorities, and the current state of the overall economy. As you can see from this chart, our projection for Measure Z revenue at the end of fiscal year 1920 is $7 million. We're looking at those numbers now to report, and staff will be reporting back to you at the second meeting in October as they appear to be trending better than estimated, which is very good news. The current fiscal year, 2021, which is the last blue bar there, we estimated $7.9 million will be generated. As you recall, that number was decreased during the budget process due to COVID-19. However, if Measure S is passed by the voters in November, the revenue will begin to be collected in April of 2021, and the city would begin to receive the revenue in June of 2021, which is in this fiscal year, of course. So the forecast changes, and that's the first green bar that you see there, from $7.9 million to $14.3 million in the current fiscal year, which is an increase of a little over $6 million. The revenue would continue to grow over time, generating over $40 million, as you can see on the last two green bars for fiscal years 25-26 and 26-27. Obviously, if the measure does not pass, Measure Z will expire in the latter part of fiscal year 21-22, and with no revenue from this source will be received beyond that point. So what are the next steps? After receiving feedback from the Mayor and City Council during this workshop, the draft resolutions will be updated accordingly and presented to the Measure Z Citizens Oversight Committee for review and input on October 5th. And on October 7th, the draft resolutions would then be brought back to the City Council along with any recommended changes from the committee for consideration at October 5th. With that, we are happy to answer any of your questions and listen to your feedback on the proposed resolutions.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. City Manager. We appreciate it. Let's go ahead and let's start with our first ward council member. Any comments, questions? Moving on to council member Ibarra of the 2nd District. Council member.
I'd like to give my colleagues an opportunity to speak before I speak.
Council member Figueroa of the 3rd District. Questions or comments?
Sorry, I was having technical issues. I couldn't get the audio and the visual back on, but I think I'm here.
Okay.
Right now, I don't have any questions.
All right. Councilmember Figueroa, are you there, sir? Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, Councilmember Charette.
No, I don't at this time.
All right. Councilmember Nickel.
Going to the comment that was received, I agree. There needs to be some teeth here. Given our history with Measure Z, I think there is a concern among the public that what are the requirements that will ensure that the council and that staff see to it that this committee is given appropriate access to information on a timely basis, and that the recommendations are brought forward in a way that ensures that the council is given an opportunity to fully consider. What discussions have taken place in the context of the committee in terms of some ideas in terms of, to use the term, add some teeth to this? Are there any thoughts to that? Is there anything we can put in place that assures that regardless of what happens in terms of our city elections and the makeup of the council, that there's going to be some assurance to the taxpayers that this process will be followed?
Well, council member, if the resolutions are adopted, that would be a council policy at that point, and we'll be bringing those back to you on October 7th. I'm not sure that I really understood your question.
And a resolution can be changed at any time at the whim of a majority of the council.
That's true.
Can we set some super majority rules in terms of changing this policy? Is that something we could add to it that would at least give us some guardrails to prevent just, another council at a future date saying, well, we're just going to change this and disregard it and forget about it?
Yeah, I'm going to let Thomas speak to that, but I don't believe you could tie the hands of the next council. But Thomas, maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, Councilmember Nickel, Ms. Ledoux's correct, but you are, as a council, you cannot tie the hands of a future council in its legislative discretion. Obviously, that doesn't always apply. You know, there's things like contracts that you enter into that a future council would be bound by. But in terms of spending, one of the most important powers of a city council is its ability to determine how to budget, where to budget resources. This is a general fund tax, so it would be going to the general fund and would be subject to future council discretion. One thing I would say in response to your question is that the protections for the voters are in the ballot measure itself. There is a requirement that a committee exist, and there is the requirement of these independent audits. So there is protection on that front. The city couldn't just ignore that responsibility moving forward. And there is obviously the ultimate responsibility, which is that the 7 council members and the mayor are accountable to the people through representative democracy. And so if you misspend that money, the voters are free to, as you all know, to vote you out. So there is that additional piece of teeth to this if you violate council policy. This is really a way of showing the public, as I understand it, what the intent is and setting those policies. But you couldn't, there is no way, as far as I'm aware, to tie the hands of a future council on its spending powers. It'd be the equivalent of setting a budget for future years and preventing a future elected council from changing that.
If the voters
So
chose, if I may, I'll wrap up here and then I'll defer to my colleagues. But if the voters were to choose, or if it was possible to potentially, in a future election, hard code these requirements into our charter, would that have the effect of hard coding our commitment to this, regardless of what happens in terms of a change on the council?
Yes, Councilmember Nichols. So if the voters were to approve a general tax measure, they could subsequently approve another initiative measure, which could tie certain funds to certain places. That is.
So we could, in theory, in a future election, convert this resolution into a charter amendment, in which case it would be enforceable upon future councils, right?
That's correct. Ultimately, the voters have the power to amend.
I think that might be something we think about over the next couple of years as we go through this, and that we understand that that's an option that that the committee may want to consider. I want to give benefit to the doubt to the process, and I trust my colleagues that we will follow through on our obligation based on this resolution. But I think we need to keep our be sensible that given the history of how Measure Z funds were utilized in the past, we need to ensure that we give maximum opportunity to ensure that these funds are in fact used for their intended purpose. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Mulvihill?
Yeah, I think one of the issues that's been pointed out is that the committee rarely met. And I think someplace in here, in terms of having a knowledgeable citizens oversight committee, they should meet on a regular basis. I'd propose that maybe we should include that the committee should meet at least every 2 months, maybe on odd months or even numbered months. But I think it's really should be part of this whole process is that they're required to meet every 2 months.
Okay, is that your comment, sir?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Let's go back to individuals who didn't have a chance to speak. Councilman Sanchez, I'll get back to you, Councilmember Richard. Just give me a few seconds here. Councilman Sanchez, Councilman Figueroa, and Councilman Richard didn't speak. Councilman Sanchez, sir?
Yeah, I think there might be issues with wanting to turn this into a special tax, while only being required to meet the 50% plus one vote threshold. Because if we want a special tax, then that would require a 2/3 vote or initiative or a measure initiated by petition, which would only require 50% vote. But what we're doing here is we're asking for the benefits of a special tax while only trying to meet the threshold of a general tax. So any more conversation on this, I think, is going nowhere. We need to be able to allow the council to do this if we want to be able to to be obligated only to meet the 50% plus one vote. I think that should end the conversation on wanting to tie our hands on how this money is spent.
Thank you, sir. Let's move on to, Councilmember Ibarra, do you have any comments, questions?
I'm still waiting for all my colleagues to pitch in. Thank you.
Councilman Figueroa, any comments? Councilmember Richard.
Well, I just wanted to comment, that I was in pure agreement with Councilmember Nickel as far as getting some teeth into it, and it was explained why it was done that way. So I was good with my comment. I was just skipped over, so I just didn't understand that. But I agree with Councilmember Charette. I'm sorry, not Charette, but Councilmember Nickel. I don't agree with you this time, Charette.
You look a lot alike.
Come on.
With Councilmember Nickel. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Ibarra, it's do or die. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, so since I came on board as a new council member, I remember telling this to our city staff, that community has to have input on the renewal for Measure Z, and that wasn't done. And now we're back to square one. I spoke on my end as a council member for my district, and in my district, the same sentiments of those 5 speakers we had today are the ones I'm hearing from my own constituents in my ward. Being that we have here, for example, they do have page numbers. Reviewing on page 4, where it says reviewing the proposed measure expenditures as part of an annual budget process. This should have been done already, and we were not good stewards to our taxpayers with Measure Z. There was a couple of years without an audit. There was years without meeting them. They were. I listened in on their last meeting that they had with our staff, and when they were asked for accountability of how the money was spent, they were referred to their council members. So I had my commissioner that I have appointed for Measure Z asking me questions for answers I wouldn't have known. That should not happen again. This is information that city staff should be providing to our commissioners, not say, oh, go back to your council member and talk to them about it. That's what I heard on the commissioners meeting. We do need to put, unfortunately, with Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to disagree. We do have to do something. Like Councilmember Nichols says, we have to put some teeth into this. We can't allow for this to, go as is. It is a general tax. It is without end at 1%. It fluctuates. And yes, I understand. We need to make sure that that we preserve the levels of service, but why not go beyond? Why do we have to preserve the current service levels? The current service levels are not working for our city. Why do we not put more into serving our city with that money? That's on page, one moment, I've typed all of these. Yeah, so on page 6, where it says preserving existing levels of service, I'm not okay with that verbiage.
Councilmember, I'm sorry. Maybe that's just maybe the way we worded it. I apologize.
Okay, yeah, because the current service levels are not acceptable in our city.
What that means is that first you would keep the current service levels, and then the additional revenue that you would add those other services. We certainly didn't mean that things would stay status quo with that additional revenue. I apologize.
Okay, yeah, because that's how I read it, and having read it the way it was, like, we're not doing good right now, and if we're asking taxpayers for that 1% sales tax, we have to show more than what we've been doing this couple of years. Let me see if I have any other questions. We definitely do have to be more accountable to our taxpayers. We do have to have the good faith policy. Being that the commissioners meet per city staff and when they're available, I see there's a big problem. That is something that us as council members can't really tell our city manager about having those meetings, because that is a city manager's duty to call for those committee meetings. So I'm concerned about that, since we didn't They didn't meet for about 2 years. I'm okay. I love having workshops. Like I said, we should have had these 2 years ago when I came on board, and I kept saying, no, the community has to give feedback. It has to be a special tax. But if we can't, I'm all for a special election for the, like Measure YY, have something similar for this one as well, so we can allocate certain funds for certain services. But yeah, I'm just very concerned. My constituents are not budging in on supporting Measure S, and I'm really concerned, especially with when me as a new elected official providing this feedback to our city staff when I got elected, when I came on board, and it was completely disregarded. So those are my comments, and I will yield.
If I could just speak to a couple of your comments, just to clarify, if that'd be okay with the council members. You had mentioned we hadn't done any community outreach. I just want to remind you that we did do community polling all year long, even on our website, we through various mechanisms, which were reported to you when we put the sales tax measure up for you to vote on. So we did do a lot of community outreach, and that's where we got a lot of the information that we have.
Correct. We paid a consultant to do that when we had commissioners that could also reach out to their community members. That's where I'm coming from.
We were not. There was nothing precluding us from doing that. And then with regard to the audits, we've always done the audits. We did get behind. We did get behind in meetings, but we are caught up now. The timing wasn't great, but we are caught up in our audits, and we've never not completed an audit. So I just want to make sure that you understand that. Did I answer all of your questions? I believe.
Yeah, it's just that I did have my commissioner, and I listened in on that meeting that you guys had recently, and they were referred to their council members.
Yeah, I apologize for that misunderstanding, because we did do a pretty comprehensive staff report where we did tell the committee how the money was spent. We showed them the audits, and we walked them through that. So if there was a misunderstanding, we'd be happy to meet with that particular commissioner.
Okay, thank you, council members. Is there a motion to entertain?
I would like to
Councilman
make
Nickel.
a motion.
There's no motion. How about
Councilman Nickel, go ahead, sir. You're recognized.
What I would like to do is present a motion, but I do want to present an amendment.
No, wait, John.
Mr. Charette, you're not recognized, sir. Mr.
I'm
Nickel,
sorry.
go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry, the way
Mr.
you
Nickel.
got around the horn, I didn't have a comment. We were waiting for Sandra, and I've got a comment now.
Okay,
I'll defer to
Go ahead.
Councilmember Charette. I didn't see his hand raised. I don't see him on
I've
my
had
screen.
my hand raised.
Okay, let's be respectful of one another. You need to go through the chair. So, Mr. Charette, go ahead. Go through the chair. Yes, go ahead. You're recognized.
Through the chair, I've had
Go
my
ahead.
hand raised. Thank you. The fact of the matter is, there are no teeth in this issue, and it's not going to change. And I've made myself some notes, and I think I was responding when I said too late for that. It was regarding Councilman Sanchez's comments about changing things, which it's too late for that. It is what it is. It's on the ballot measure. And the ballot measure is for us, for 7 council members in this city to decide how we're going to spend this money. And we can do all we want with advisory committees, and I support them. I agree with them. But there will never be teeth in an advisory meeting. If you have 4 or 5 votes against an advisory committee, that's what's going to happen. So there is no teeth in this thing. I've said from the beginning, and I'll say it tonight publicly again, it's on tape, the city needs this money. There's no doubt about it. But how we use it and how we spend it is the problem. And currently, the committee currently has really no input, just a recommendation. And this is very concerning to me about these taxes. And I am not overly excited about some of the Measure Z, Measure 15, for example, on the state level, has gone from a 60-40 to about a 50-50 right now. I'm very concerned about this tax. I'm very concerned. And I am concerned that it's going to be a salary tax and a benefits tax and a retirees tax. And I do want to put some teeth in the issue. I want to put teeth, but you know what? In December, we're going to have 2 or 3 or possibly, well, hopefully not 2 or 3, but we're going to have some new council members and possibly 3 new council members. And then 2 years later, we're going to have possibly 2 more or 4 more. So the point I'm talking about is this thing can change every 2 or 4 years. And it's a concern of mine. And I believed from the beginning, and no one seems to have the ability or the chutzpah, if you will, to put it on as a special tax. It says this is dedicated to. And I have some ideas on what we do with this additional $27 million.
I'm going to remind you that we're here to talk about the policy for not the tax measure.
Well, but this is it's all relevant. I'm sorry, Terry, but it's all relevant. It is how we deal with this money going forward. And I've got my ideas, but I don't know that I've got 6 council members gonna join me in the way I think it should be spent. So it's a concerning thing. And Sandra said it, I've said it before, and I don't think we've done a good job of being good stewards of the money. And this is about $27 million more a year that I'm real concerned about how we're going to spend it. So those are my comments.
Okay.
I have some real concerns about this thing, and I'm not so concerned. I'm not so convinced that the public trusts us to raise this $27 million and spend it appropriately.
Thank you, Councilman Charette. All right, Councilman Nichols, sir, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to make a motion to approve the resolution contingent upon an amendment to Section 2, subsection 2, which would begin, and I'll ask my colleague, Mr. Mulvihill, if he's okay with this as well. But I'm willing to meet you maybe in the middle, Mr. Mulvihill. I would like to add to the very beginning of subsection 2 that the committee will meet at least quarterly.
Good. That's fine.
And then annually, the committee will present to the mayor and council the results of their review.
Good.
But I want this, I think one of the lessons we learned with Measure YY is when the committee only meets once a year, there's a very high likelihood that the committee will be undercut. If it's meeting at least quarterly and we start falling behind, there will be a lot of noise being made by the public. So I think that is a potential safeguard that adds some teeth. I agree with my colleagues. It may not be enough teeth at this point, and we can certainly look several years down there, a couple years from now, perhaps at a charter amendment, if we get to the point where we feel it's necessary. But I think adding that quarterly meeting requirement at least gets us to the point where we're increasing our accountability to the public. So I would add that amendment and put forward a motion to approve based on that.
And I'll second that. And I absolutely agree that they should meet more than once. And the way it reads here, as part of an annual budget process, well, that may be just once a year. Obviously, as time goes on, priorities change, and the committee needs to be updated on a continual, more or less continual basis to be a competent, really advisor to the council. And so,
I thought we weren't voting on anything tonight.
We're just getting concurrence, if you will, so we'll know what to bring back. You're not going to take an official vote.
Okay, so no motion then?
If we can add that addition.
Is there any objections to
make
that? If
recommendation.
not, I think you have, you're taking notes, Terry and Rob, so.
Yes, and I just want to remind you, the roles and responsibility of the current Measure Z committee were to review the audit after the fact. And this new policy that were presented to you, they get to have some input on the front end too. So
okay. Great. All right.
I have a quick legal question.
Okay, Fred.
And Henry alluded to the charter. Thomas, taxes aren't dealt with in the charter, are they? I mean, I'm not sure exactly what you were alluding to, Henry, but this is a tax, and it has nothing to do with the charter of the city of San Bernardino, if I'm not mistaken.
I can actually speak to that if you'll let me, because when I was
I wanted legal. I wanted legal on that.
Councilmember Charette, you are correct that taxes are not presently dealt with in the city charter. It's perfectly acceptable for the public to adopt a tax either through an ordinance or they could adopt a tax in the charter. It's not something I would necessarily recommend, but they're entitled to do so. I think Councilmember Nichol was just suggesting a legislative approach to solve the problem, but the charter would be an option.
What I was going to share with you is when I was in the city of Huntington Beach, for instance, their charter actually said they would spend 15% of their revenues on infrastructure improvements on a rolling average.
Thank you very much. That was my question.
Okay, council members, I sensing that unless you guys want to keep on asking questions, we could be here all night. I appreciate the staff for your presentation. Thank you, council members, for your insight and your statements tonight. With that, I believe we have concluded. We're done, Terry, is that right? We're good? All right, cool, thank you. This meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.
Whoa, wasn't there a vote? Wasn't there a motion in a second?
No, there's no vote
We
needed.
don't vote tonight, special meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Now vote.
Meetings
Good night,
adjourned.
bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.